You think being left to die requires a gun or a scream, but sometimes it just takes a silent boat and a note weighed down by a stone. I woke up to the smell of baking aluminum and the realization that my husband had arranged for this boat to be stripped of everything that could save us while I slept. He left me with nothing but my 10-year-old daughter, 2 bottles of water, and a piece of paper that read, simply, "You chose this. My name is Ruth Rogers." And the first thing I registered was not the betrayal, but the heat. It was a physical weight, heavy and suffocating, pressing down on my eyelids before I could even command them to open. When I finally forced my eyes apart, the world was blinding white and blue. The sun was not just a celestial body today, it was a weapon. It was hanging directly overhead, a searing eye that refused to blink, turning the aluminum floor of the boat into a skillet. I sat up. The movement made the world tilt. My head throbbed with a dull, rhythmic ache that felt artificial, like a hangover without the alcohol. I blinked, trying to clear the haze, and looked around. Water, that was all there was. Lake Cumberland stretched out in every direction, a vast, indifferent sheet of glass reflecting the violence of the midday sun. The shoreline was a distant, hazy smudge of green, miles away, too far to swim, too far to scream. The silence was absolute. There was no hum of an engine, no laughter from the other boats, no splashing of water against the hull, just the sound of my own blood rushing in my ears and the shallow, terrified breathing of the person beside me. Lena, my daughter, was curled up in the bow, her knees pulled tight to her chest. She was 10 years old. But in that moment, she looked 5. She was clutching her orange life vest so hard her knuckles were white. Her eyes were wide open, staring at nothing, fixed on the empty horizon. She was not crying. That terrified me more than tears would have. Tears are a release. Silence is shock. She was hyperventilating, short, sharp gasps that sounded like a small animal trapped in a box. "Lena," I said. My voice was a croak. My throat felt like it had been scrubbed with sandpaper. She did not look at me. She just kept breathing. In and out, fast and shallow. I forced myself to move. Panic was rising in my chest, a cold tide trying to drown reason. I pushed it down. I had to be clinical. I had to be the Ruth Rogers who audited benefits claims for a living, the woman who looked at disasters and found the paper trail. I could not be a victim, not yet. I scanned the boat. It was a small aluminum fishing vessel, the kind you rent for a half day of leisure. No roof, no shade, just metal and open air. I crawled to the stern, ignoring the way the hot metal burned my palms. I reached for the ignition key. Empty. The slot gaped at me, a dark, mocking hole. I checked for the kill switch lanyard, the red safety cord that clips to the driver. Gone. I moved faster now, adrenaline cutting through the druggy haze in my brain. I checked the side compartments. Usually, there would be oars, paddles, anything to give you a chance against the current. Empty. I checked the storage under the seats. The brackets where the fire extinguisher should have been were bare, leaving only clean, unoxidized circles where the screws had been recently removed. This was not negligence. Negligence is leaving the flares at home. Negligence is forgetting to gas up the tank. This was different. This was subtraction. Someone had unscrewed the mounting brackets. Someone had deliberately removed the emergency whistle. Someone had untied the rope that anchored the throw cushion. My eyes fell on a backpack sitting in the middle of the boat. It was not mine. My bag was a sturdy navy blue tote I had brought from Ohio. This was a cheap, gray nylon backpack I had never seen before. It sat there like an intruder. I unzipped it, my hands trembling slightly. Inside, there was a stone, a jagged, heavy piece of limestone, likely picked up from the shore before we launched. Underneath the stone, pinned against the fabric of the bag, was a single sheet of paper. I pulled it out. It was standard printer paper, crisp and white, blinding in the sunlight. There was no letterhead, no date, no handwriting that I could analyze. Just 3 words printed in the center of the page in a standard, sans serif font. You chose this. The words hit me harder than the heat. They were cold, metallic, impersonal. You chose this. It was a gaslight in written form. It was a narrative being constructed in real time. If we died out here, if they found our bodies days from now, this note was meant to be found with us. I pressed the air out and sealed it. This was not a goodbye letter. This was Exhibit A. I placed the sealed bag deep inside the zippered pocket of my shorts. I patted it once to ensure it was secure. I crouched beside Lena. Lena, I need you to tell me exactly what happened while I was asleep, I said. Her breathing stuttered. For a second, I thought she would disappear back into that blank stare. Then her eyes found mine, and she forced the words out. One by one. Uncle Mason came, she whispered. His boat pulled right up next to us. He said you were having a nap, and that we had to be quiet. He reached over and took your blue bag, the one with your phone. He left this backpack and said it had snacks. Then he took the key. He took the rope and the cushion and the oars. He said it was safer if there was less stuff on the boat. My stomach tightened until it felt like a fist. Did Dad come over? I asked. She shook her head hard. Dad stayed far away. The story snapped into place with a clean, ugly logic. Then I turned my attention to the rest of the gray backpack. Mom, Lena whispered. It was the first sound she had made. It is okay, baby, I said, my voice steady now. It was a lie, but it was a necessary one. We are going to be fine. I need you to listen to me. I need you to be brave. I dumped the contents of the backpack onto the hot aluminum floor. 2 plastic water bottles. One was sealed, the other was cracked open. A quarter of it already gone. 3 packs of peanut butter crackers, a small box of waterproof matches, and a stainless steel thermos. I recognized the thermos. It belonged to Loretta, my mother-in-law. It was the one she used for her herbal teas. The ones she was always pushing on me, telling me I looked stressed, telling me I needed to relax. I unscrewed the cap. A waft of steam escaped, carrying a scent that was sickly sweet. It smelled of chamomile and honey, but underneath that, there was something else, something chemical, something metallic and bitter that coated the back of my throat just from the smell. It was the smell of the headache I had woken up with. It was the smell of the heavy, leaden sleep that had allowed them to transfer us from the big boat to this floating coffin without us waking up. I am thirsty, Lena said, eyeing the thermos. No, I snapped. The word came out harsher than I intended. I softened my tone, reaching out to touch her knee. Not that, Lena, never that. That is not for us. I capped the thermos tight. I did not pour it out. I needed the liquid inside, not for hydration, but for the lab. If we got back when we got back, I needed a toxicologist to tell me exactly what Loretta had put in that tea. I put the thermos back in the backpack, burying it at the bottom. I picked up the open water bottle. The plastic was warm from the sun. We have to play a game, Lena, I said. We have to be very smart about water. We are not going to drink because we are scared. We are going to drink by the clock. I looked at my wrist. My smartwatch was dead. Black screen. Of course. They would not leave me with a communication device. I looked at the sky. The sun was slightly past its zenith. It was likely around 1 in the afternoon. Take a sip, I said, handing the bottle to Lena. Just a sip. Swish it in your mouth before you swallow. She obeyed, her small hands shaking as she held the bottle. She took a tiny swallow and handed it back. I took a sip myself, just enough to wet my tongue, and screwed the cap back on tightly. I stood up, shielding my eyes, and scanned the horizon again. The lake was massive. Lake Cumberland is not a simple oval. It is a sprawling, serpentine body of water with hundreds of jagged fingers and hidden coves. We could be anywhere, and the current was moving. I looked at the water rushing past the hull. It was slow, but it was steady. We were drifting, and we were drifting away from the distant green smudge of the shore, moving toward the center, toward the widest, deepest, loneliest part of the water. They knew this current. My husband, Philip, had grown up on this lake. his brother, Mason, knew every inlet. They knew exactly where to cut the engine. They knew exactly where the drift would take us. I did the math in my head. Exposure was the enemy. Dehydration was the weapon. Panic was the accelerant. If we panicked, our hearts would beat faster. We would sweat more. We would burn through our water reserves in 2 hours. We would make mistakes. I looked at the sun. It was beating down with a ferocity that felt personal. The aluminum was getting hotter. Rules, I said aloud, mostly to myself, but also for Lena. We need rules. Rule 1. Shade. We could not stay exposed. Rule 2. Conservation. Movement costs energy. Energy costs water. We had to be still. Rule 3. The timeline. I stared at the silent outboard on the transom. Why leave us with water at all? Why leave the crackers? Because they wanted it to look like an accident that went on too long. They wanted us to be found, eventually, just not alive. Or if we were alive, they wanted us broken. They wanted the narrative to be that Ruth Rogers got confused, got lost, and snapped under the pressure. But there was another variable: time. If this was a rescue mission, if Philip had just forgotten us, or if the engine had died and he went for help, he would be back. A normal person would be back in an hour, 2 hours, maximum. I set a deadline in my mind: 9 hours, 9 hours until sunset. If I did not see a boat, a helicopter, or a searchlight in 9 hours, it meant they were not coming. It meant they were sitting in that rented lake house, eating dinner, looking at the clock, and waiting for the sun to go down so they could call the police and perform their grief. 9 hours. I looked at Lena. She was hugging her knees again. "Okay," I said, my voice dropping into the flat, command tone I used when I led audit meetings. "Lena, listen to me. We are going to build a fort." I stripped off my light cardigan. It wasn't much, but it was fabric. "Give me your life vest," I said. "I can't," she whispered. "What if I drown?" "You won't drown because you are not getting in the water," I said firmly. "But the sun is trying to hurt us right now, and the vest is going to help us fight back." She hesitated, then slowly unbuckled the vest. I took the vest and examined the straps. They were nylon, tough and durable. I used the knife edge of the metal seat bracket sharp enough to cut if I worked it hard to saw through one of the side straps. It took 5 minutes of sweating, grinding effort, but the strap came free. I tied one end of my cardigan to the boat's side railing and the other to the handle of the center console. I used the life vest to prop up the middle, creating a small, tented area of shade on the floor. It was pathetic. It was small, but it was a shadow. "Get under," I told Lena. She crawled into the small patch of darkness. I squeezed in beside her. The relief was instant, though minor. The sun was no longer hitting our skin directly, but the air was still stagnant and boiling. We sat there in the silence. The boat rocked gently, a cradle designed to kill us. I closed my eyes for a second, and the image of my husband's face flashed in my mind. Philip, the man who had kissed me goodbye last night, the man who had said, "We need this trip, Ruth, we need to reconnect." He had known. When he kissed me, he knew he was going to leave me here. When he packed the bags, he knew he was packing a tomb. The realization didn't bring tears. It brought a cold, hard clarity. It froze the panic in my veins and turned it into something solid, something I could use. They thought I was weak. They thought I was the city girl who crunched numbers and complained about humidity. They thought 2 words on a piece of paper would break my mind. "You chose this." I opened my eyes and looked at the blinding water. "No," I whispered. I reached into my pocket and touched the outline of the Ziploc bag. I did not choose this, but I was going to finish it. "Mom," Lena asked from the dark of our makeshift tent, "where is Dad?" The question hung in the hot air, heavy and suffocating. I looked at her. I could lie. I could tell her he was coming. I could tell her the boat broke down and he was swimming for help. That would be the kind thing to do. That would keep her heart intact for a few more hours. But we were past kindness. We were in survival, and survival required truth, even if it hurt. I don't know. Lena, I said. I didn't say he is coming back. I didn't say he loves us. But he is going to have to explain this, I said, and my voice sounded strange to my own ears, low, guttural, dangerous. He is going to have to explain all of this. I watched the water drift by. We were moving further out. The shore was just a line now. The isolation was complete. I started counting the seconds in my head. 1, 2, 3, 32,400 seconds left until sunset. I would stay awake for every single one of them. I would memorize the angle of the sun. I would memorize the drift of the current. I would memorize the thirst that was already starting to scratch at the back of my throat. I would memorize it all, so that when I got back to shore, I could burn them down with the truth of it. The boat creaked, the sun hammered down, and we drifted, silent and alone, toward the middle of the lake. The heat was no longer just a temperature. It was a predator digesting us slowly. I moved Lena deeper into the shadow of the makeshift tent I had constructed. Her skin was clammy, despite the sun, and her pulse was fluttering like a trapped moth against my fingertips. This was the early stage of heat exhaustion. Panic would kill her faster than dehydration, so I had to be the anchor. I stripped off my socks, dipped them into the lake water over the side of the boat, and pressed the cool, wet fabric against the back of her neck and her wrists. She flinched but did not pull away. I needed to signal, and I needed to do it before my own motor functions began to degrade. I crawled to the stern, my knees burning on the aluminum floor. I picked up the stainless steel thermos from the backpack. The lid was polished metal, slightly convex. It was not a perfect mirror, but it would catch the light. I sat facing the sun, tilting the lid back and forth, trying to find the angle of reflection. I aimed it at the horizon, sweeping the beam across the water in a rhythmic arc. 3 short flashes, 3 long, 3 short. I did not know if anyone was watching, but I had to act as if the entire world was looking at me. If I stopped acting, I would start dying. Between the intervals of signaling, I turned my attention to the engine. It was a 40-horsepower outboard, standard for a rental skiff. It sat silent and mocking on the transom. I reached back and unlatched the plastic cowling, lifting the cover to expose the machinery underneath. I am not a mechanic, but I understand systems. I understand that things usually break due to wear and tear, rust, or friction. What I saw was not wear and tear. The battery cables were disconnected. That happens. Sometimes they vibrate loose, but when I looked closer, I felt the blood drain from my face, leaving me cold in the blistering heat. The terminal nuts, the small metal fasteners that hold the cables to the battery posts, were missing. I ran my finger over the battery posts. The lead was bright and shiny, scarred by fresh scratches. Someone had used a wrench here. Recently, they had not just loosened the cables, they had unscrewed the nuts completely and thrown them into the lake. This was not an oversight. This was not a faulty rental. This was murder by omission. I lowered the cowling gently, careful not to make a sound, as if the person who did this was still watching from the shore. I looked at Lena. She was staring at the water, her eyes glazed. I could not tell her. Not yet. I reached into the back pocket of my denim shorts. I felt the crinkle of paper. It was an old receipt from a gas station in Columbus, forgotten from a week ago. I smoothed it out on my thigh. It was thermal paper, fading, but still legible. I took the small pen from the first aid kit, a tiny, useless thing meant for marking injury times, and I began to write on the back of the receipt. Ruth and Lena Rogers, abandoned on Lake Cumberland, engine disabled intentionally, battery nuts removed, no safety gear. If found dead, check Philip Brady and Mason Brady, check the insurance, check the land deed. My hand shook, but the letters were blocky and clear. This was my statement. If the water took us, this piece of paper would speak for me. I folded the receipt until it was the size of a postage stamp. I looked around the boat for a hiding place. If they came back to finish the job, They would search the obvious places. I reached under the driver's seat. There was a small gap between the aluminum bench and the flotation foam underneath. I jammed the paper deep into the crevice, wedging it in so tight that you would need pliers to retrieve it. "Mom," Lena's voice was thin, barely audible over the lap of the water. I turned. She had crawled out of the shade slightly. Her face was flushed. "Where is Dad?" she asked again. It was the question that hung over us like the sun. She wanted reassurance. She wanted me to say he was looking for us, that he was worried, that he was a hero who had just made a mistake. I looked at her, and I made a choice. I would not lie to her, but I would not destroy her father yet. I would let him do that himself. "Dad is going to have to explain this," I said, my voice low and hard. "When we get back, he is going to have to answer every single question. But right now, Lena, he is not here. I am here. And you have to listen to me. Is he coming back?" "I don't know," I said. "But we are not waiting for him. We are saving ourselves." The wind shifted in the late afternoon. The sky, which had been a relentless blue, began to bruise with purple clouds rolling in from the west. The water turned choppy, the small waves slapping harder against the aluminum hull. The boat began to drift faster. I looked at the distant shoreline. It was perhaps 2 miles away. I was a strong swimmer in a pool. I could do laps for 30 minutes without stopping, but towing a 10-year-old in open water, against a current, with a storm brewing, that was not swimming. That was drowning with an audience of 0. I calculated the odds. If I swam, I became a tiny speck in a chaotic texture of waves. If I stayed in the boat, I was a 12-foot white object. A white object is easier to see than a human head. "We stay," I whispered. "We stay big." I went back to the mirror. My arm ached. My shoulder joint felt like it was grinding bone on bone, but I kept flashing. Flash, flash, flash. Time lost its meaning. It became measured in throbs of my headache. 1 throb, 2 throbs. Then I saw it. It was a speck, appearing and disappearing between the swells to the east. It was moving parallel to us. Not toward us. A fishing boat. Low profile. Bass boat. I scrambled up, standing on the bench seat, balancing against the rock of the waves. I held the thermos lid high, catching the last angry rays of the afternoon sun. I aimed it right at the speck. "Look at me. Look at me." I waved my shirt, my bright yellow cardigan, in wide, frantic arcs. The boat kept moving. It was going to pass us. My chest tightened. I let out a sound that was half scream, half sob. "Hey, over here. Hey." The sound was swallowed by the wind. They couldn't hear me. I focused on the mirror. I steadied my hand against my forehead to stop the shaking. I aimed the reflection right at the pilot's console of the distant boat. One long flash. Holding it. Holding it. The boat slowed. The bow dropped from its planing angle and settled into the water. It stopped. He saw me. But he didn't turn immediately. He sat there, idling. I could see the silhouette of a man standing up, looking through binoculars. Why was he waiting? Was he one of them? Paranoia? Sharp and irrational? Spiked in my chest. Had Philip hired someone to watch us die? No, that was crazy. He was hesitating because an empty boat in the middle of the lake usually means trouble. It means a drug drop, or a trap, or a crime scene. Finally, the boat turned, the nose swung toward us, and the engine roared to life. He closed the distance fast, the hull cutting through the chop with aggressive precision. As he got closer, I saw him. He was older, maybe 50. He wore a faded cap and a performance fishing shirt that had seen better days. His face was weathered, the kind of skin that has been cured by wind and UV rays like leather. He slowed down as he approached, bringing his boat alongside ours with the practiced ease of someone who had spent more time on water than on land. He killed the engine. The silence that followed was heavy. He didn't smile. He didn't wave. He looked at me. Then he looked at Lena, huddled in the nest of life jackets. Then his eyes swept over my boat. He saw the missing oars. He saw the empty bracket for the fire extinguisher. He saw the 2 lonely water bottles. He knew. I could see the realization hit him. He was a waterman. He knew what a boat looked like when it was prepped for a day out, and he knew what a boat looked like when it had been stripped. "You ladies look like you are having a bad day," he said. His voice was gravelly, a thick Kentucky drawl. "My engine died," I said. It was the first time I had spoken to an adult in hours. My voice cracked. He looked at the engine, then back at me. "No radio." "No," I said. "Phone." "Lost it." I lied. I wasn't going to tell a stranger everything, not yet. "Current is dragging you toward the dam," he said. "You are about 4 miles out." He looked at Lena again. She was shivering now, the adrenaline crash setting in. His expression softened. Just a fraction. "I am Caleb," he said. "Caleb Wren." "Ruth," I said. "This is Lena." "Well, Ruth," he said, moving to the back of his boat to grab a tow line. "Let's get you off this frying pan." He tossed me the rope. I tied it to the bow eye of our boat. My hands were stiff, my fingers fumbling with the knot. He watched me, checking my work without saying a word. When he was satisfied, he nodded. The tow back to land took 40 minutes. It was a slow, humiliating procession. I sat in the back of my hollowed-out boat, holding Lena, watching the wake of Caleb's boat churn the water white. I watched the shoreline get closer. I saw trees. I saw docks. I saw civilization. We pulled into Wolf Creek Marina just as the sky was turning a bruised purple. The marina was busy. People were docking, laughing, carrying coolers full of beer and leftover sandwiches. The smell of gasoline and grilled burgers hit me, and my stomach turned over. Caleb pulled us up to the gas dock. He jumped out and pulled our boat in, tying it off to the cleat. He offered a hand to Lena first, lifting her out onto the solid wood of the dock as if she were made of glass. Then he offered a hand to me. I took it. His grip was rough and calloused. I stepped onto the dock. My legs wobbled. The ground felt wrong, too stable, too still. Caleb stood there, looking at the empty boat one last time. He looked at the missing safety gear. He looked at the battery box I'd left unlatched. "You want me to call a mechanic for that engine?" he asked. It was a test. He knew it wasn't a mechanical failure. I looked him in the eye. The anger I had bottled up for 9 hours, the cold rage that had kept me focusing on the horizon, finally bubbled up to my throat. "No," I said. "Don't call a mechanic." I smoothed Lena's hair, pulling her tight against my side. "My family left us out here," I said. The words hung in the air between us, louder than the noise of the marina. Caleb went still. The polite concern on his face evaporated, replaced by a cold, dark understanding. He looked at the boat, then back at me, and nodded once. "I will walk you to the office," he said, "to understand why I ended up drifting toward the intake valves of a dam. You have to understand the 2 weeks that preceded it. You have to understand that violence in the suburbs rarely looks like a fist. It looks like a document sent via DocuSign at 10 o'clock on a Tuesday night. It looks like a mother-in-law suddenly concerned about your tax bracket. It looks like a husband who is too tired to fight for you, so he decides to manage you instead. I live in Columbus, Ohio, and I work as a senior auditor for the Crestline Benefits Integrity Office. My job is not exciting to explain at dinner parties, but it essentially involves looking at stacks of paper that claim one thing and finding the single line of data that proves another. I hunt for inconsistencies in disability claims, insurance payouts, and corporate expense reports. I am paid to notice when the dates do not align. When the doctor's signature looks a little too shaky, or when a receipt for a business lunch includes a bottle of wine that costs $300, I have spent 15 years learning that the truth is never in the bold print. The truth is always in the footnotes. The trouble began with a letter that arrived on a Thursday. It was a standard notification of probate from a small law firm in Pulaski County, Kentucky. My great-aunt Sarah had passed away. We were not close. I had not seen her since I was 12, but apparently, I was the only relative left who had not borrowed money from her and failed to pay it back. She left me a parcel of land. It was not a fortune. It was 3 acres of scrub brush and limestone rock near a service road. According to the county assessor, it was worth maybe $4,000. I threw the letter on the kitchen counter and barely gave it a second thought. 3 days later, my husband, Philip, came home with that look on his face. Philip is a good man, or at least, he was designed to be one, but he is the younger brother of Mason Brady, and in the Brady family, Mason is the sun, and Philip is the planet that gets scorched. Mason is a serial entrepreneur, which is a polite way of saying he starts businesses with other people's money and exits them before the lawsuits start. Philip, the dutiful project manager, always ends up handling the cleanup. He carries the debt, he carries the stress, he carries the secrets. Mason is in a bind, Philip said, loosening his tie. He didn't look at me. He looked at the refrigerator. The development company needs liquidity. He says it is a short-term cash flow issue. It is always a short-term cash flow issue, I said. I was chopping carrots. The knife hitting the cutting board with a rhythmic thud. Thud, thud. How much does he need this time? It is not about money, Philip said. He just needs us to be flexible with some collateral, just on paper. I stopped chopping. No, we agreed. No more leveraging our house for Mason's ideas. It is not the house, Philip said quickly. He mentioned something about assets, family assets. I didn't put it together then. I just saw a tired man trying to keep the peace with a brother who bullied him. The first red flag arrived the following Monday. I opened my work email and found a message in my personal folder. It was from a real estate broker I had never contacted. Dear Mrs. Rogers, I represent a buyer who is very interested in the 3-acre parcel you recently acquired in Pulaski County. We are prepared to offer $75,000 for a quick close, provided we can finalize by the end of the month. I stared at the screen. $4,000 was the assessed value. $75,000 was not a market correction. It was a desperate bid. I applied my work brain to the problem. Why pay 20 times the value for rocks and weeds? I pulled up the county maps. I overlaid the zoning proposals. I checked the state infrastructure bills. There it was. My 3 acres were right in the middle of a proposed access route for a new luxury marina and condo development. The developers had bought every plot of land for 2 miles, except for my aunt's scrub brush. It was a bottleneck. Without my land, their access road would have to detour 3 miles around a ridge, costing them millions in grading and paving. I held the leverage, and I hadn't even listed the property. That evening, Loretta Brady called. My mother-in-law usually called once a month to ask if I had lost weight or to criticize the way I parted Lena's hair. This time, her voice was dripping with honey. "Ruthie," she purred. I hate being called Ruthie. "I was just talking to Mason, and we were thinking about how hard you have been working. You sound exhausted." "I am fine, Loretta," I said, putting the phone on speaker so I could fold laundry. "Well, we are worried about you, with that new land you inherited. The taxes are going to be a headache. The paperwork alone is a nightmare for someone who is already so busy. Mason has a lawyer who handles all our family holdings. We were thinking, to make it easier for you, we could bundle that little plot into the family trust, just to shield you from the liability." I paused, a sock in my hand. Liability. "It is just dirt, Loretta." "Oh, you never know," she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "People get sued over property lines all the time. Mason just wants to protect you. He can buy it from you for a nominal fee, handle the taxes, and you won't have to think about it. We can keep it in the family." "A nominal fee?" I asked. $5,000, she said. "Cash, just to take it off your hands." She didn't know I had the email offering $75,000, or maybe she did, and she assumed I was stupid. "I will think about it," I said, and hung up. My heart was pounding. They knew. Mason knew the land was the key to the development deal. He probably had the contract with the developers ready to go. He wanted to buy it from me for $5,000. Sell it for 75 or maybe 100 and pocket the difference to save his failing company. And Philip? Did Philip know I found him in the garage, tinkering with his golf clubs? I showed him the email from the broker. Did you tell Mason about the land? I asked. Philip flinched. It was a small movement, a tightening of the jaw, but I saw it. I might have mentioned it, he said. He tracks property in that area. He just recognized the address. He wants me to sign it over for $5,000, I said. This broker is offering $75,000. Mason is trying to cheat us. Philip, again. It is not cheating, Philip said, his voice rising. He is trying to consolidate the deal. If he controls the whole block, he can negotiate a better rate for everyone. He will cut us in later. Like he cut us in on the restaurant franchise, I asked. Like he cut us in on the solar panel startup. We are still paying off that loan. Philip, this is different. He slammed a golf club back into the bag. Why do you always have to be so suspicious? Why can't you just trust my family for once? Because your family treats trust like a currency they can print, I said. I am not signing anything until I see the development plans. I want to know exactly what this land is worth to them. That was the moment the atmosphere in the house changed. Philip stopped arguing. He went quiet. He started sleeping in the guest room, claiming his back hurt. 2 days later, the invitation came. Let's go to the lake, Philip said over breakfast. He looked ragged, dark circles under his eyes. Mom rented a big house at Lake Cumberland. Mason and Janelle are going. They want us to come. Bring Lena. Let's just decompress. We can talk about the land when we are all relaxed. No lawyers, just family. I wanted to say no. Every instinct in my body screamed no. But I looked at Lena. She was eating her cereal. Oblivious. She missed her dad. She missed her cousins. Fine, I said. But I'm not bringing any paperwork. Of course not, Philip said. He smiled. But it didn't reach his eyes. The night before we left, I was searching for a charger for Lena's tablet. I found the family iPad tucked between the cushions of the living room sofa. It was unlocked. I went to the browser to close the tabs Lena had opened Minecraft wikis, YouTube videos of slime making, but there was one tab that wasn't a game. It was a Gmail draft. It was Philip's account. My breath hitched. The subject line was reevaluation/next steps. I clicked on it. It was a draft email addressed to a lawyer I didn't recognize, with Mason CC'd on the chain. I understand the requirements for the temporary guardianship. Ruth has been under a lot of stress lately. Her behavior has been erratic. She is becoming paranoid about family finances and obsessed with conspiracy theories regarding the business. If we can demonstrate that she is not in a position to make financial decisions, can we expedite the power of attorney regarding the Kentucky assets? We are worried she might do something rash. I read it twice. Erratic, paranoid, not in a position to make decisions. They were building a file. They weren't just trying to scam me out of the land. They were preparing to declare me incompetent if I refused to sell. They were going to use my professional skepticism, the very thing that made me good at my job, as proof that I was mentally unstable. I dropped the iPad on the couch as if it were burning. My first impulse was to run, to grab Lena and drive to a hotel. But then the auditor in me took over. If I ran now, I would look exactly like the erratic woman they were describing. If I disappeared in the middle of the night, they would use it. See? She took the child and fled. She is manic. No, I had to be calm. I had to be saner than they were. I needed evidence. I needed to see how far they would go. I walked into the kitchen. Philip was packing a cooler. He looked up, smiling that tight, anxious smile. All set, he asked. Philip, I said. I kept my voice perfectly level. I saw an email on the iPad. He froze. The ice pack in his hand dripped onto the floor. What? About the guardianship. About me being paranoid. His face went pale, then flushed red. Ruth, that was Mason's idea. He is just worried. You have been so intense lately. We were just exploring options in case you had a breakdown. It is just a draft. I never sent it. You let him write it, I said. You let your brother draft a plan to take my rights away because I won't give him a piece of land. It is not like that, Philip pleaded. He moved toward me, hands up. Look, just come to the lake. Talk to Mason. Show him you are fine. Show him you are reasonable. If you sign the transfer, all of this goes away. He just needs the land. Ruth, he is desperate. If this deal fails, he loses everything. He will drag us down with him. So I am the ransom, I said. You are the solution, he said. Please, just for the weekend. Play nice, sign the paper, we get the money, we save the family, and we go back to normal. And if I don't sign, Philip looked away. Just come to the lake, please. I looked at him. Really looked at him, and I realized he was terrified. He was more afraid of his brother than he was of losing me. Okay, I said. I will come. I didn't say I would sign. I said I would come. I went upstairs and finished packing. I packed my clothes. I packed Lena's swimsuit. And then, quietly, I packed my own separate emergency kit. I took photos of the land deed on my phone and uploaded them to a secure cloud drive. I forwarded the broker's $75,000 offer to my work email. I took a screenshot of the guardianship draft email and sent that too. I was walking into a trap, but I thought I knew the dimensions of it. I thought the worst they could do was pressure me, shout at me, maybe threaten to sue me. I thought the danger was legal. I thought the battlefield was going to be a dining room table covered in contracts. I underestimated them. I assumed that because they wore polo shirts and drove SUVs, they weren't capable of physical violence. I assumed that because we were family, there was a line they wouldn't cross. I was wrong. The next morning, we drove south. Lena sat in the back, singing along to the radio. Philip gripped the steering wheel so hard his knuckles were white. It is going to be a great trip, he said, staring at the highway. Just relax, Ruth. Just let it happen. I looked out the window as Ohio gave way to the rolling hills of Kentucky. I didn't know it then, but I was looking at the last scenery I would see as a whole person. The woman who came back from this trip would not be the same woman who left. We arrived at the rental house in Jamestown in the late afternoon. It was a sprawling structure of glass and cedar, perched on a cliff overlooking the water. Mason's Hummer was already in the driveway. Loretta was on the porch, holding a glass of wine. When she saw our car, she waved. It was a big theatrical wave. "They are here," she called out. I stepped out of the car. The air smelled of pine needles and damp earth. It should have been peaceful. Instead, the hair on my arms stood up. I looked at the lake below. It was vast, blue, and silent. "Welcome to paradise," Mason said. Appearing in the doorway, he was smiling, but his eyes were checking my hands, looking for the paperwork folder. "Hi, Mason," I said. I didn't smile back. I walked past him, holding Lena's hand, gripping it tight enough that she looked up at me in surprise. "Mom, you're hurting me," she whispered. "Sorry, baby," I said, loosening my grip. "Mommy is just focused." I walked into the house, into the trap, believing that my intelligence was enough to protect us. I didn't know yet that intelligence means nothing when you are unconscious. I didn't know that the capacity evaluation wasn't a legal threat. It was a script they were writing, and they needed a scene where I lost my mind. Or better yet, a scene where I disappeared. The rental house was an architectural statement of glass and cedar, perched on a limestone cliff overlooking the dark water of Lake Cumberland. It was beautiful, but it felt sterile. There were no personal touches, no dog-eared magazines on the coffee table, no scuff marks on the hardwood. It felt less like a vacation home and more like a stage set where the props had been arranged by a set dresser who was obsessed with symmetry. We walked into the great room, and the air conditioning was set low enough to prickle the skin. The rest of the Brady clan was already there, arranged around the kitchen island as if they were waiting for a director to call action. Mason Brady stood in the center, uncorking a bottle of red wine. He was taller than Philip, broader in the shoulders, with the kind of aggressive charisma that works well in boardrooms and poorly in real life. His wife, Janelle, was perched on a bar stool, scrolling through her phone. She looked up and flashed a smile that showed all her teeth, but none of her warmth. Grant, my father-in-law, sat in the corner armchair, staring at the television, which was muted. He looked smaller than I remembered, or maybe he was just shrinking into the upholstery to avoid the tension that was already vibrating in the room. And then there was Loretta. She came out of the kitchen, wiping her hands on a linen towel. She was wearing white, a brave choice for a lake house, or a calculated one to suggest purity. "Ruthie," she exclaimed, coming forward to hug me. Her perfume was overpowering, a floral scent that masked something stale underneath. She squeezed me too hard, holding the embrace a second longer than was natural, checking the tension in my shoulders. "And my sweet Lena, look at you. You have grown a foot." "Hi, Grandma," Lena said, hugging her back. Lena was the only innocent thing in this room. "Phones," Mason said, pointing to a wicker basket on the entryway console. "House rule for the weekend. We are unplugging, no work emails, no distractions. We are here to connect." It sounded like a modern wellness trend. But as I looked at the basket, I saw Mason's phone wasn't in it. Neither was Loretta's. They were asking us to disarm while they stayed connected. "I need mine for work emergencies," I said, clutching my purse. "Ruth," Philip said softly, touching my elbow. "Just for tonight. Please, don't start a fight before we even unpack." I looked at Philip. He looked desperate. I decided to pick my battles. I took my phone out and dropped it into the basket. It landed with a soft thud against Janelle's phone. I noticed later that Janelle retrieved hers 10 minutes later, but nobody said a word. We were assigned the downstairs guest suite. It was a beautiful room, but as I unpacked, I noticed a small black circle on the ceiling in the hallway. Pointed directly at our door, a camera, a generic home security device, perhaps, but its placement felt predatory. It wasn't watching the front door. It was watching us. Dinner was a performance. We sat around a long farmhouse table made of reclaimed wood. Mason served steaks that were rare, slicing into the meat with a precision that made me lose my appetite. "It is good to have everyone at the table," Grant said, lifting his glass. It was the first thing he had said in 2 hours. "It is," Loretta agreed. She looked at me. "Family is the only thing that matters in the end. Assets come and go. Markets crash. But blood is permanent. That is why we have to protect the circle. We can't let outsiders chip away at what we have built." I cut a piece of potato. "Outsiders?" I asked. "Is that the theme of the weekend?" "Don't be sensitive." "Ruth," Mason said, pouring more wine into Philip's glass. "Mom just means we have to be smart. We have opportunities right now, big ones, but they require unity. They require liquidity." "The land," I said. I didn't frame it as a question. The table went quiet. The only sound was the clink of silverware. "It is a small piece of the puzzle," Mason said, leaning back, "but it is a necessary one. That strip of dirt you inherited is just sitting there. Ruth, it is a liability for you. Taxes, maintenance, liability insurance if some kid trespasses and breaks a leg. We are offering to take that headache away." "For $5,000, I said. "When the market value to the developer is $75,000. Mason's eyes narrowed. He looked at Philip, then back at me. "Philip told you about the valuation." "No," I said. "I did my own research. I am an auditor. Mason, I don't sign things I haven't read, and I don't sell things I haven't valued." Loretta laughed. It was a brittle, tinkling sound. "Oh, Ruthie, always the accountant. We are not trying to cheat you. We are trying to keep the money in the family. If you sell to a stranger, that land is gone. If you transfer it to the trust, the value stays with us, with Lena. Then write a contract that reflects the true value," I said. "Put the $75,000 in a trust for Lena. I will sign that." Mason smirked. "That is not how liquidity works. Ruth, we need the asset unencumbered so we can leverage it for the larger financing." So you need me to give it to you for free. Essentially, I said. We need you to be a team player, Loretta said. Her voice dropped an octave. It lost the grandmotherly lilt and became something hard and flat. You know, Ruth, refusing to cooperate when the family is in crisis, it looks bad. It looks unstable. I put my fork down. Unstable? Is that why you had Philip draft an email about a capacity evaluation? The silence that followed was absolute. Philip went pale. He stared at his plate as if he wished it would swallow him. I saw the draft, I said, looking directly at Loretta. Emergency guardianship, because I am paranoid, because I am obsessed with conspiracy theories. We were worried about you, Loretta said smoothly, not missing a beat. You have been working so hard. You seem frazzled. We just wanted to make sure there were legal protections in place for Lena if you had a breakdown. I am not having a breakdown, I said, my voice steady. I am having a negotiation, and using my daughter as leverage is not going to work. Loretta smiled, but her eyes were dead. Not signing is also a choice, Ruth, but choices have consequences. I stood up. I am done eating. Come on, Lena. Lena looked between us, confused and scared, holding a half-eaten roll. Mom? We are going to the room, I said. As we walked away from the table, I passed the kitchen archway. Standing in the shadows was Tessa Brady, Philip's younger sister. She was the one Brady who never spoke up, the one who lived in the guest house and avoided the business. She was holding a tray of desserts, but she wasn't moving. She looked at me. Her eyes were wide, fearful. She gave a tiny, almost imperceptible shake of her head. It was a warning. Don't push them. Or maybe run. I didn't stop. I took Lena to our room and locked the door. I checked the window. It was sealed shut. I put a chair under the doorknob. Mom, why is everyone mad? Lena asked, sitting on the bed. They are not mad at you, honey, I said. They are mad at business. It is boring adult stuff. I didn't sleep that night. I listened. I heard footsteps in the hallway, pausing outside our door. I heard low voices in the great room until 2 a.m. I heard the distinct beep of the keypad on the front door, signaling someone going out or coming in. Morning came with a false brightness. The sun was shining, the lake was sparkling, and the smell of bacon filled the house. I walked into the kitchen, exhausted and wired. Loretta was at the counter, brewing tea. Good morning, she said, as if the conversation at dinner had never happened. You look tired, dear. Here. I made my special blend, chamomile, valerian root, a little honey. It helps with the nerves. She handed me a stainless steel thermos. It was the same one I would find later in the boat. I am fine with coffee, I said. Please, Loretta said. Consider it a peace offering. I am sorry if I was harsh last night. We are all just stressed. She held the thermos out. Her hand was steady. Everyone in the kitchen was watching Mason. Janelle, even Philip. If I refused, I was the rude one. I was the paranoid one. I took the thermos. Thank you. I unscrewed the cap and took a small sip. It was sweet, sickly sweet. But beneath the honey and the heavy floral notes of the chamomile, there was a chemical aftertaste. It tasted like metal and chalk. I knew that taste. I had tasted it once before when I had dental surgery and the nurse gave me a sedative syrup. My heart hammered against my ribs. They weren't just pressuring me, they were dosing me. I didn't spit it out. That would cause a scene. I swallowed the tiny sip, forcing a smile. It is good, I said. I will take it on the boat. I screwed the cap back on tight. Great, Mason said, clapping his hands. Boat day. We have 3 boats rented. I figured we would split up to avoid crowding. He pointed a finger at me. Ruth, you and Lena take the aluminum skiff. It is smaller, slower, better for cruising close to the shore. Philip, you are with Dad and me on the pontoon. We need to talk strategy. Janelle and Mom can take the runabout. Why can't Philip come with us? I asked. He needs to help Dad with the lines, Mason said. Dad's back is acting up. Besides, the skiff only seats 3 comfortably, and you will want space for Lena to play. It was thin. It was a transparent segregation. Divide and conquer. Separate the target from the herd. Fine, I said. I looked at Philip. He was looking at the floor, putting on his sunglasses. He knew. He had to know. Philip, I said. He looked up. His eyes were hidden behind the dark lenses. Have a good time, he said. His voice was hollow. I walked down to the dock, holding Lena's hand in my left hand and the poisoned thermos in my right. The aluminum skiff was waiting. It bobbed in the water, looking innocent. I stepped in. I put the thermos in the backpack Mason had handed me, a gray backpack, not my own. I saw the life jackets. I saw the cooler. It looked prepared. I didn't know then that the drain plug had been checked, the safety gear removed, and the note printed. I just knew that the water looked deep, and my husband wouldn't look at me. Start her up, Ruth, Mason yelled from the dock. I turned the key. The engine sputtered and caught. We motored out. I watched the house get smaller. I watched the figures on the dock turn away. 10 minutes later, the drowsiness hit me. That single sip was potent. My eyelids felt like lead shutters. My limbs felt heavy. Mom, are you okay? Lena asked. Just tired, baby, I mumbled. Just resting my eyes. I remember cutting the engine because the noise was hurting my head. I remember drifting, and then I remember nothing but the dark, until the heat woke me up to a world that had been stripped of everything but water and a choice I never made. The last clear moment I had before the heat woke me was the taste of copper and honey on my tongue and the sight of Mason's runabout carving a wide circle around us, throwing wake like it was playing. After that, time fractured. I woke to an empty horizon, a missing key, and a boat that had been stripped down to metal and sun. Lena told me what she had seen Mason pulling alongside, calmly removing the tools of survival while my husband stayed just far enough away to claim he never saw it. Everything after that was arithmetic shade, water, minutes, horizon lines. When Caleb Wren finally saw my flashes and towed us into Wolf Creek Marina, it did not feel like rescue. It felt like a deadline I had managed to beat by inches. The Russell County Medical Center was a small, single-story brick building that smelled of floor wax and rubbing alcohol. It was a stark contrast to the organic chaos of the lake. Here, under the buzzing fluorescent lights, the world was ordered. It was sterile. It was exactly where I needed to be. Deputy Dana Kelso stood at the foot of the examination bed, her notebook open. She was a woman in her 40s with a tight ponytail and eyes that had seen enough domestic disputes to be skeptical of everything. She looked at me, then at Lena, who was sitting in a plastic chair in the corner, sipping a juice box provided by a nurse. Ms. Rogers, Kelso said, her pen hovering over the paper. We need to get a clear statement on the sequence of events. The marina manager says you claimed your family left you out there. I am not claiming anything. Deputy, I said. My voice was raspy from dehydration, but I forced it to be steady. I am reporting a crime. I want to be very precise about the terminology we use. This was not a dispute. This was endangerment. Okay, Kelso said, her tone neutral. Start from the departure. I took a breath. I knew how this worked. If I cried, if I screamed, if I waved my hands and talked about betrayal, she would write down subject is emotional and agitated. That would become the foundation for the Brady's narrative that I was unstable. I had to be an auditor. I had to be boring, factual, and irrefutable. At approximately 11 in the morning, we departed the dock, I stated. My brother-in-law, Mason Brady, assigned the boats. I was given a 16-foot aluminum skiff with a 40-horsepower outboard before departure. I was given a drink by my mother-in-law, Loretta Brady. Approximately 20 minutes later, I experienced a sudden onset of extreme drowsiness and loss of motor control. I lost consciousness. Kelso stopped writing. She looked up. You passed out. I was drugged, I said. And that is why I need a toxicology screen, right now, before it metabolizes out of my system. Kelso blinked. Ma'am, we usually only run tox screens for DUI cases or... I am requesting it as evidence for an attempted homicide investigation. I cut in. I consent to a blood draw, I consent to a urine sample, and I want the samples split and sealed in my presence to ensure the chain of custody. The use of the phrase chain of custody made Kelso straighten up. She realized I wasn't just a hysterical tourist. I knew the procedure. She signaled the nurse, "Draw it," while the nurse tied the rubber tourniquet around my arm. I continued. When I regained consciousness, the boat had been altered, the safety equipment was removed, the ignition key was gone, the battery cables to the engine were disconnected, and the retaining nuts were missing. This was mechanical sabotage, not failure. "And your husband?" Kelso asked. "Where was he?" "He was on a separate vessel," I said. "He did not respond to visual signals." The nurse slid the needle into my vein. I watched the dark red blood fill the vial. That vial was my savior. It was the only thing that could prove I hadn't just taken a nap in the sun. "Test Lena too," I said. "She is clean. I want the contrast on record. It proves the substance was targeted at me." Kelso nodded. She was writing faster now. "I need you to impound the boat, Deputy," I said. "Do not let the rental agency clean it. Do not let the Bradys near it. The missing fire extinguisher brackets, the tool marks on the battery terminals that is your physical evidence. We have already secured the vessel at the marina," Kelso said. "I have an officer there now." "Good," I said. "And I have a witness, Caleb Wren." "The man who towed you in," Kelso said. "He saw the condition of the boat," I said. "He knows what he saw." 30 minutes later, Kelso left the room to go to the marina. I lay back on the crinkly paper of the exam table. My head was still throbbing. A lingering reminder of the chemical cocktail Loretta had brewed. I checked the clock on the wall. It was 8 in the evening. We had been off the water for 2 hours. I waited for the door to open. I waited for Philip to burst in, breathless, apologizing, crying, telling me it was all a mistake, that he had been looking everywhere for us. Part of me, the foolish, sentimental part, that had been married to him for 12 years still wanted that. But the door didn't open. Instead, a nurse came in with a clipboard. "Ms. Rogers, there is a fax for you. It came to the front desk." "A fax." I sat up. "From who?" "It is from a law firm in Columbus," she said. "They said it was urgent legal notification." My stomach turned over. I took the paper. It was a motion for an ex parte emergency custody order. The header was stamped with today's date. The petitioner was Philip Brady. The respondent was Ruth Rogers. I scanned the legalese, my eyes burning. Petitioner alleges that respondent has suffered a psychotic break, exhibited paranoid delusions regarding family members fled with the minor child onto open water found drifting and unresponsive. Due to suspected substance abuse, immediate danger to the child. They hadn't called the Coast Guard. They hadn't called the sheriff to report us missing. They had called their lawyer. They had used the 9 hours while I was drifting to draft a motion to steal my daughter. They had timed it perfectly. They expected me to be found dead, or found raving mad from dehydration. I looked at the timestamp on the fax. It was sent 40 minutes ago. They knew I was alive. Someone at the marina, maybe the rental guy, maybe a bystander had tipped them off, and their reaction wasn't relief. It was a preemptive strike. My phone, which I had retrieved from the nurse's station after using the clinic's landline to recover my cloud account, buzzed. It was a text from Philip. I stared at the screen. No. Are you okay? No. I love you? No. Thank God you are safe. Just you need to cooperate to keep things quiet. The lawyers can handle the transition. Don't make a scene in front of Lena. I felt a laugh bubble up in my throat. Dry and jagged. Don't make a scene. He leaves me to die in the middle of a lake. And his main concern is that I might be loud about it. I looked at Lena. She was asleep in the chair, exhausted. "No," I whispered. I was not going to cooperate. I dialed a number I had memorized years ago. Monica Vale. Monica was not a nice person. She was a shark in a Chanel suit. She specialized in high-conflict divorces and asset recovery for the kind of women who married CEOs and woke up to find their bank accounts frozen. I had audited a firm she represented once. I respected her because she was the only person in the room who looked at a spreadsheet with the same predatory intensity that I did. "This is Vale," she answered on the second ring. "Monica, this is Ruth Rogers, from the Crestline Audit." "Ruth?" she said. Her voice shifted instantly from defensive to intrigued. "It is 8:30 on a Sunday. You are not calling me about a tax discrepancy." "No," I said. "I am in Kentucky. My husband and his family just tried to kill me." I didn't sugarcoat it. I gave her the bullet points: the land, the poisoning, the boat, the emergency motion they had just filed. When I finished, there was a silence on the line. Then, I heard the sound of a lighter clicking and a long exhale. "They filed ex parte?" Monica asked. "Yes, alleging psychosis and substance abuse." "They moved fast," Monica said. "That tells me everything. They moved first because they thought you wouldn't survive to contest it. This motion was written to be read over your obituary. Ruth, they wanted to grab the girl and the assets before the autopsy results came back." "What do I do?" I asked. "I have a toxicology screen pending. I have a police report." "Good," Monica said. "But family court doesn't care about police reports yet. Family court cares about who looks stable right now. If you go back to Ohio tonight, they will have a sheriff waiting at your driveway to take Lena. The order is probably already signed by a judge who plays golf with their lawyer." "I am not giving them Lena," I said. "Then we need to freeze the battlefield," Monica said. "I am going to file a counter-motion in the morning, but tonight, you need to lock everything down. Do you have the toxicology receipt?" "Yes." "Photograph it. Send it to me. I want you to sign a HIPAA release form right now blocking access to Lena's medical records. If they get their hands on her, they will hire a therapist to coach her into saying you were acting crazy on the boat. We need to seal her file." "Done," I said. "And Ruth," Monica said, her voice dropping lower, "get a restraining order. Tonight, in Kentucky, if you get a Kentucky judge to sign a protective order based on the police investigation, it trumps the Ohio custody order. It creates a jurisdictional conflict. It buys us time." "On what grounds?" "Attempted murder," Monica said. "Domestic violence, child endangerment. Throw the book at them. Make the judge afraid to let them near you." I hung up and looked for Deputy Kelso. She had just returned from the marina. She looked different. Her skepticism was gone, replaced by a grim, tight-lipped expression. "You were right," Kelso said. "I saw the boat." She held up a plastic evidence bag. Inside was a small, shiny metal nut. "We found one of the battery nuts," she said. "It wasn't in the water. It was wedged in the rubber matting near the transom. It has tool marks on it. Ms. Rogers, pliers. Someone unscrewed it and dropped it." "Did you talk to Caleb?" I asked. "I did," Kelso said. "He gave a sworn statement. He said the boat was stripped. He said he saw the other Brady boats at the marina when he towed you in. He said they were eating pizza on the deck of their houseboat. They weren't searching. They weren't panicked." "They were celebrating," I said. Kelso nodded slowly. "I am opening a criminal file. Charge is wanton endangerment. First degree. Possible upgrades depending on the DA. I need a protective order," I said. "For me and my daughter, against Philip, Mason, and Loretta Brady." Kelso pulled a clipboard from her bag. "I thought you might ask for that. I have the judge on call. Given the evidence on the boat and the pending talk screen, I think he will sign it." I took the pen. My hand was steady. I signed my name, Ruth Rogers. I looked at the facts from Philip's lawyer again. "You need to cooperate." I took a picture of the protective order application and the evidence bag with the battery nut. I attached them to a text message. I didn't send it to Philip. I sent it to the group chat, the one with Mason, Loretta, Janelle, and Philip. I typed 3 words. "I am awake," then I blocked them all. "Deputy," I said, handing the clipboard back. "I need a ride to a hotel. and I need an officer posted outside my door, because when they realize I'm not playing their game, they are going to stop using lawyers and start using something else. I will take you myself, Kelso said. I woke Lena up. She looked at me with sleepy eyes. Is Dad here? No, bye, I said, lifting her up. It is just us, but we are safe. We walked out of the clinic into the humid Kentucky night. The air was thick, but for the first time in 12 hours, I could breathe. I had the evidence. I had the law. And most importantly, I had the rage. They wanted a war. They wanted to bury me in paperwork and gaslight me until I broke. They had forgotten one thing. I read paperwork for a living, and I know exactly where the bodies are buried. Monday morning did not bring sunlight. It brought a torrent of data. I was sitting in a budget hotel room in Somerset, 3 miles from the police station. The curtains were drawn. Lena was watching cartoons on the hotel television with the volume turned low, blissfully unaware that her mother was currently coordinating a forensic counterattack on her father's family. My phone, now connected to a new charger and a secure Wi-Fi signal, buzzed. It was Monica Vale. I have the marina logs, she said without preamble. Her voice was crisp, cutting through the stale air of the hotel room. We subpoenaed the rental agency first thing this morning. Ruth, the timeline is not just bad for them, it is catastrophic. Tell me, I said, opening my laptop to take notes. According to the GPS trackers on the rental units, which, by the way, Mason Brady apparently forgot existed, their boats returned to the dock at 3:30 in the afternoon. I looked at the clock on the wall. 3:30? I was barely waking up then. I was still drifting. Exactly, Monica said. They docked, they offloaded, and then, according to the marina's key fob entry system, they went to the bar and grill. There is a credit card charge from Mason Brady at 4:15 for 3 large pizzas and 2 pitchers of beer. I felt the bile rise in my throat. While I was calculating water rations and shielding Lena from the sun, they were eating pepperoni pizza less than 4 miles away. And the call to the lawyer, I asked. The fax for the emergency custody order was sent at 7:45. Monica said, That is a 4-hour gap, Ruth. 4 hours where they sat on the dock, ate dinner, and waited for the sun to go down so they could claim you were lost in the dark. They didn't call the sheriff. They didn't call the Coast Guard. They ate pizza and drafted a motion claiming you were psychotic. It proves intent, I said. They weren't looking for me because they knew exactly where I was. It proves depraved indifference, Monica corrected. And in family court, it proves they are a danger to the child. I am filing the counter motion now. But Ruth, we need more than timelines. We need a smoking gun that links the sabotage to a specific person. I am working on it, I said. I hung up and drove to the sheriff's office. Leaving Lena in the care of a female officer Deputy Kelso had assigned to watch our door, Kelso was waiting for me in the evidence room. The air smelled of dust and cardboard. On the table, inside clear plastic bags, were the items from my boat, the thermos, the battery nut, and the note. The lab tech dusted the thermos, Kelso said, pulling on a pair of latex gloves. We found 3 sets of prints. Yours, obviously, a small set, likely your daughter's, and a 3rd set on the cap and the body. Loretta, I said. We are running a comparison against the glass she drank from at the rental house. We picked it up from the trash this morning, Kelso said. But the interesting part is the battery nut. She pointed to the tiny piece of metal in the bag. It is too small for a clear ridge detail, she said. But the grease pattern is distinct. Whoever took this off had grease on their thumb, and we found a corresponding smudge on the engine cowling of Mason Brady's rental boat. If we can match the chemical composition of the grease well, it puts Mason at your engine. It locks the lie, I said. He claimed he never touched my boat. Exactly, Kelso said. But we have a problem. Their lawyer is already pushing back. They are claiming the toxicology will show you overdosed on your own medication. They are saying the note was something you wrote yourself. My phone rang again. It wasn't Monica. It was a number I didn't recognize, with a 614 area code. Columbus. Hello. Mrs. Rogers, this is Vice Principal Hames from Lena's school. My heart stopped. Is everything okay? Well, that is what I wanted to ask you, the woman said, sounding uncomfortable. We received a call this morning from a Mrs. Loretta Brady. She identified herself as the grandmother. She wanted to inquire about our protocols for traumatic withdrawal. Traumatic withdrawal, I repeated. Yes, she asked if we had a counselor on staff who specializes in children whose parents have suffered a severe mental health crisis. She wanted to know if she could come pick up Lena's records because she expected to be enrolling her in a school closer to her home in Kentucky. I closed my eyes. They weren't just reacting. They had a roadmap. They had called the school before I was even officially missing on paper. Mrs. Hames, I said, my voice shaking with rage. I am alive, I am sane, and my daughter is safe with me. Do not release any records to that woman. If she calls again, tell her to speak to my attorney. I hung up. The net was visible now. It was a coordinated assault on my existence. They wanted to erase Ruth Rogers, the auditor, and replace her with Ruth Rogers, the lunatic. Then, my phone buzzed with a text. It was from a burner number. Supermarket on Highway 127. Blue sedan. Row G. Come alone. 10 minutes. I showed the screen to Kelso. It could be a trap, Kelso said. It is Tessa, I said. It has to be. I drove to the supermarket. It was a gray, overcast day, the kind where the rain hangs in the air without falling. I parked my rental car 2 rows away from the blue sedan. I saw a figure in the driver's seat. I walked over. The window rolled down. Tessa Brady looked like she hadn't slept in a week. Her eyes were red, her hands trembling on the steering wheel. She didn't look at me. She kept her eyes on the rearview mirror, checking for her brother's Hummer. I can't stay, she whispered. If Mason knows I'm here, he will ruin me. He holds the loan on my bakery. Ruth, he owns me. Why are you here? Tessa, I asked. Because I saw the boat, she said, tears spilling over. I saw them laughing. Ruth, they were laughing while you were out there. I couldn't do it. She shoved a small silver USB drive into my hand. What is this? I synced my iPad with the family cloud account before they changed the passwords. She said, It is the group chat, the one they didn't think I was reading. Tessa. Just take it, she hissed. And Ruth, don't tell them it was me. Please, just say you hacked it. She rolled up the window and peeled out of the parking lot, leaving me standing in the exhaust fumes with the smoking gun in my palm. I drove back to the station. Kelso plugged the USB into a standalone laptop. We opened the file. It was a series of screenshots from a chat thread titled Project Lake. I read the messages, and I felt the cold realization that I had been living with monsters. January 14th, 8:30. A.M. Mason, weather looks perfect. Hot, no wind, drift will be slow. January 14th, 9. A.M. Loretta. She is suspicious, asking too many questions about the trust. We need to accelerate. January 14th, 9:15 a.m. Philip. I don't know if I can do this. What if Lena gets scared? January 14th, 9:20 a.m. Mason. Don't be weak, Phil. You just need to keep her separated on schedule. The engine failure buys you an hour. By the time anyone notices, the drift will have them 5 miles out. January 14th, so 25 a.m. Loretta. If she won't sign the papers with a pen, let the lake teach her what it feels like to be alone. She will sign anything to get back to shore. January 14th, 2 p.m. Janelle. Are they back yet? January 14th, 2:10 p.m. Mason, no. And they won't be. Not until she breaks. I stared at the screen. Let the lake teach her. This isn't just endangerment, Kelso said, her voice hard. This is conspiracy. They planned the separation. They planned the distress. Keep scrolling, I said. There was an image attachment in the chat. It was a photo of the note. You chose this. Mason printed this at the office. Nice touch. Right ambiguous. If she jumps, it is a suicide note. If she comes back, it is just a warning about her choices regarding the family. I froze. Printed at the office. Which office? Kelso asked. Stonebridge. I whispered. Your husband's company? No, I said. The pieces finally clicking into place. Not just his company. I looked at the physical note yesterday. Deputy, I noticed the paper texture. It has a watermark. Conqueror CX22. It is a very specific, expensive bond paper. I grabbed my laptop and pulled up the photos I had taken of the documents Philip had brought home months ago, the work papers he was always stressed about. Stonebridge Development Services, I said. Philip told me he was a project manager for a logistics firm, but Stonebridge, look at their logo. I pulled up the website. Stonebridge Development Services, building the future of Lake Cumberland. They are the developers, I said. The ones buying the land. I looked at Kelso. Philip doesn't just work for a company that wants the land. He works for the developer. He is not in debt to his brother. Deputy. He is partners with him. The debt was a lie to make me feel sorry for him. They are building the marina together. My land, my 3 acres, is the only thing stopping a $20 million project. The betrayal went deeper than I thought. Philip hadn't just been bullied by his brother. He was an architect of the scheme. He had married me, lived with me, and fathered my child, all while waiting for the moment he could cash us out. Kelso picked up the phone. I am calling the district attorney. We have conspiracy, we have the digital footprint, and with Caleb's statement about the timeline, we have the actus reus. What about the child endangerment? I asked. Oh, it is sticking, Kelso said. Leaving a 10-year-old in an open boat without water or shade for 9 hours to force a real estate transaction in Kentucky, a jury will burn them alive for that. But there was one more thing. Caleb Wren had walked into the station while we were reviewing the logs. He looked uncomfortable in the indoor light, turning his hat in his hands. Ms. Rogers, he said. There was something else I remembered. What is it? Caleb. When I was towing you in, he said, I saw the runabout Mason's boat. It was docked, like I said, but I saw something glinting on the stern. Glinting. A GoPro, Caleb said. Mounted on the tow bar, facing backward. I looked at the chat logs again. January 14th. Mason cameras rolling. We need footage of her acting crazy on the water. If she screams, if she waves her arms, we use it for the custody hearing. They had filmed it. They had filmed their own crime, thinking they were filming my breakdown. Get that camera, I told Kelso. If they haven't wiped it yet, you will see exactly how crazy I was. You will see a mother building a tent to save her child. Kelso nodded. I am getting a warrant for the GoPro. And Ms. Rogers, I think you should stay at the hotel tonight with the officer, because when we serve these warrants, the Brady family is going to realize the narrative has flipped. I walked out of the station. The rain had started to fall, washing the dust off the streets of Somerset. I had the logs. I had the chat. I had the connection to Stonebridge. But most of all, I had the truth about Philip. He wasn't the weak, coerced husband. He was the one who had typed, I don't know if I can do this, and then did it anyway. He was the one who chose this, and now, I was going to make sure he lived with that choice in a cell. The digital eye of the Ring doorbell camera distorted his face, bending Philip's features into a fisheye caricature of the man I had married. I stood in the hallway of our Columbus home, the lights off, watching him on my phone screen. He was standing on the porch, but he wasn't looking at the door. He was looking at the street, scanning for police cruisers. It had been 4 days since I walked out of the police station in Somerset. 4 days of silence from him, broken only by legal filings. And now, here he was, wearing the same wrinkled polo shirt he had worn at the lake, looking like a man who had driven 3 hours north with a gun to his head. I checked the time. 7:14 in the evening. Monica, I whispered into my AirPods. He is here. Do not open the door. Monica Vale's voice was sharp in my ear. You have a temporary protective order. Call 911. Let the Columbus PD pick him up. No, I said. If I call the police, he lawyers up. If he lawyers up, he stops talking. I need him to talk. Ruth, this is dangerous. He is not here to hit me. Monica, look at his hands. He is holding a manila envelope. He is here to trade. I hung up before she could argue. I opened the voice memo app on my phone, hit the red record button, and slid the phone into the back pocket of my jeans. Microphone facing out. I unlocked the deadbolt. The sound was a gunshot in the quiet house. I opened the door, but I kept the security chain engaged, a 4-inch gap. That was all the grace I was willing to give him. Philip turned. He looked exhausted. His eyes were bloodshot, rimmed with the kind of dark circles that come from sleeplessness and gin. When he saw me, really saw me, alive and standing in the house he thought I would never return to, he flinched. Ruth, he breathed, you are violating a Kentucky court order. Philip, I said. My voice was ice. I can have you arrested in 3 minutes. I know, he said. He held up his hands. I know. I just need 5 minutes. Please, before the hearing tomorrow, we can fix this. Fix what? I asked. The engine, or the fact that I survived? Don't, he winced. Don't talk like that. It wasn't nobody wanted you dead. Ruth, it got out of hand. Mason pushes things. You know how he is. I know how he is, I said. I want to know how you are. Where were you when the boat was drifting? Philip, were you enjoying the pizza? He looked down at his shoes. I was scared. Mason said if I went back for you, it would ruin the timeline. He said you were fine. He said you would just float for a few hours, get scared, and sign the papers when we towed you in. It was supposed to be a negotiation tactic. Ruth, not this. A negotiation tactic, I repeated, using dehydration and heat stroke as a bargaining chip. I have a way out, he said, rushing the words now. He tried to push the envelope through the crack in the door. Look, I talked to them. I talked to the lawyers. If you sign the land transfer tonight, just the land, nothing else, they will drop the emergency custody petition. They will drop the psychological instability claims. We can seal the records. We can pretend this weekend never happened. I looked at the envelope. It was the deal, my daughter's freedom in exchange for 3 acres of dirt. That is extortion. Philip, I said. It is a settlement, he pleaded. Ruth, look at the alternative. Tomorrow morning, we go into court. They have texts. They have emails where you sound paranoid. They have a psychiatrist ready to testify that your behavior at the audit firm has been obsessive. If the judge grants the temporary order, they take Lena. You know how the system works. Once she's in the system, getting her back takes months. Do you want her living with Loretta for months? The threat hung in the humid air between us. He was using my own knowledge of the bureaucracy against me. He knew that even innocent people lose in family court if the paperwork is stacked wrong. I leaned closer to the gap. I needed him to say it clearly. I needed the recording to catch every syllable. Who took the key? Philip? I asked. He froze. What? The ignition key, I said. And the battery nuts. And the oars. Who physically removed them? Was it you? No. The denial was instant. I didn't touch the boat. I swear. Then who did? You were on the dock. You watched us leave. He looked over his shoulder again. Paranoid. He lowered his voice to a whisper. I didn't think they would go that far. Ruth, Mason said he was just going to disable the fuel line so you would stall out. I didn't know he stripped the safety gear until Caleb brought you in. When I saw the empty boat, I threw up. Ask Dad. I threw up in the parking lot. I didn't think they would go that far. There it was, the admission. He knew there was a plan. He knew about the sabotage. He just disagreed with the extent of it, in the eyes of the law. That made him a co-conspirator. Go home, Philip, I said. Ruth, please, sign the paper. They are going to destroy you in court tomorrow. Let them try, I said. I slammed the door and locked it. I leaned against the wood, my heart hammering against my ribs not from fear, but from the adrenaline of the kill. I pulled my phone out and stopped the recording. File saved. I sent it immediately to Monica. Her reply came 30 seconds later. I have it. This is gold. But get ready. They just filed a supplemental motion. They are playing dirty. The hearing the next morning was a virtual proceeding, a concession to the fact that the parties were in different states. I sat in Monica's office in downtown Columbus, framed by her wall of legal degrees. On the screen, the Brady family lawyer, a slick man named Aris Thorne, sat in a conference room that looked more expensive than my entire house. Philip was not on camera. He was unavailable. Your Honor, Thorne began, his voice smooth and deeply concerned. We are here because the minor child, Lena Rogers, is in immediate danger. The mother, Ruth Rogers, has exhibited a rapid and terrifying decline in mental stability over the last 2 weeks. He pulled up a slide. It was a text message thread. Ruth. They are watching me. I know they are checking the logs. Ruth. I can't sleep. I think someone was in the house. Counsel is presenting redacted communications regarding a federal audit investigation as evidence of domestic instability. We can provide the full, unredacted threads which clearly show Mrs. Rogers was discussing a subpoena. Not a delusion. We will get to context later, the judge said. Looking tired, Mr. Thorne, you are alleging the mother disabled the boat. We are, Your Honor, Thorne said. We have a note found on the scene. You chose this. We believe this was Ms. Rogers' final message to her family before she attempted to end her life and the life of the child. Okay, Monica said. Our turn. She shared her screen. First, the toxicology report. This is a blood panel taken from Ms. Rogers 2 hours after the incident, Monica said. It shows the presence of a benzodiazepine-based sedative. Ms. Rogers does not have a prescription for this medication. However, we have a receipt from a pharmacy in Jamestown, Kentucky, showing a prescription for the same drug filled by Loretta Brady 3 days prior. The judge's eyebrows went up. Second, Monica clicked the next slide. This is a photo of the boat's battery. Note the missing retention nuts. And this is a close-up of the tool marks. She pulled up the crime lab report from Deputy Kelso. The grease found on this nut matches the grease found on the engine cowling of the boat rented by Mason Brady, unless Ms. Rogers swam over to her brother-in-law's boat, greased her hands, swam back, and disabled her own engine while unconscious. The petitioner's narrative is physically impossible. Thorne shifted in his chair. He started to interrupt, but the judge held up a hand. And finally, Monica said, the timeline. She displayed the marina logs, the timestamp of the pizza order, the timestamp of the lawyer's fax. Your Honor, Monica said. The petitioner claims he was frantic with worry, yet, while his wife and child were missing on a lake, he was eating a meat lover's pizza and drinking a pitcher of beer. He did not call 911. He called Mr. Thorne. This was not a rescue mission. It was a scheduled demolition. The judge looked at Thorne. Counsel, do you have an explanation for why your client ordered dinner instead of a search and rescue helicopter? Thorne cleared his throat. My clients were in shock. They were following legal advice to preserve the scene. They were preserving their appetites, the judge snapped. The emergency custody order is denied. The temporary protective order stands. And Mr. Thorne, if I find out those text messages were deliberately manipulated to mislead this court, I will sanction you personally. We are adjourned. The screen went black. I let out a breath I'd been holding for 20 minutes. We won the skirmish, Monica said, closing her laptop. But not the war. They are going to come back hard. They are going to attack your finances. They are going to try to foreclose on your house if they can find a way. Let them, I said. I have something else. I drove home, feeling a strange, vibrating energy. The victory felt good, but it felt incomplete. They were still out there. They were still rich. They still had the lawyers. I pulled into my driveway. The house looked normal, but as I walked to the front door, I remembered something Philip had said on the porch. I didn't think they would go that far. Why did he say that? Why was he so desperate to settle last night? I went to my computer and pulled up the Ring camera history. I scrolled back. Not to yesterday, to the weekend, to the days we were in Kentucky. I found it. Sunday, January 14th, 1 p.m., while I was lying unconscious in the boat, drifting toward the dam. A figure walked up to my front porch in Columbus. It was Philip. He unlocked the door. He went inside. He stayed for 12 minutes. Then he came out. He was carrying a box, a banker's box. I zoomed in. The box was labeled in my handwriting, personal/legal/drafts. He hadn't just left me on the lake. He had driven back to Ohio, or had someone drive him to scrub the house. He had come to steal the evidence I had gathered before the trip. The email drafts about the guardianship, the broker's offer. He wanted to make sure that if I died, there would be no paper trail in the house that pointed to a motive. He had sanitized the crime scene before the crime was even finished. My phone pinged. A secure email notification. It was Tessa. No subject line. Just an attachment. I opened it. It was a photo of a document, taken hastily on a lap, blurry at the edges. Life assurance policy. Term 10 years. Insured Ruth Rogers. Beneficiary Stonebridge Holdings. LLC. Key person clause. I scanned the numbers. The payout wasn't $75,000. It wasn't the value of the land. It was $2 million. My breath caught in my throat. I read the fine print. The policy had been taken out 6 months ago. Philip had asked me to sign a stack of refinancing papers for the mortgage back then. I had signed them, trusting him. One of those pages must have been the authorization for this. Beneficiary Stonebridge Holdings, LLC, Mason's Company. It wasn't just about the bottleneck. It wasn't just about the road. The land was the excuse. The land was the trigger. But I was the payday. If I sold the land, they made money. But if I died in a tragic boating accident, leaving the land to Philip, who would transfer it and triggering a $2 million payout to the company to cover the loss of a key family asset. They cleared the debt. They funded the marina. They became kings of the lake. I stared at the screen, the pixels swimming before my eyes. They hadn't just tried to scare me. They hadn't just tried to declare me incompetent. They had built a business model where I was worth more dead in the water than alive in their family. I picked up the phone and called Deputy Kelso. "Dana," I said, "it is not just wanton endangerment anymore. What do you have? Ruth?" "I have the motive," I said, "and it is worth $2 million. The evaluation room was painted a soothing, inoffensive shade of beige, the kind of color designed to make you forget that you are being dissected. Doctor. Aristham sat across from me, his pen hovering over a legal pad. He was the court-appointed forensic psychologist, the man tasked with deciding if I was a grieving, paranoid widow-in-waiting or a stable mother who had survived a crime. "Tell me about the boat, Ruth," he said. His voice was neutral. Stripped of judgment, I sat straight in the chair. I did not wring my hands. I did not cry. I channeled every ounce of my professional training. I treated the interview like a deposition. "The boat was a 16-foot aluminum skiff," I said clearly. "It was rendered inoperable by the removal of the battery retention nuts. I was rendered unconscious by a sedative administered in a beverage provided by my mother-in-law. When I woke up, my priority was thermal regulation for my daughter and signaling for rescue. I constructed a shade structure. I rationed the remaining water. I established a signaling protocol using a reflective surface. Doctor." Aristham stopped writing. He looked at me over the rim of his glasses. "You constructed a protocol. Panic is a variable," I said. "Variables introduce error. I removed the error. My daughter is alive because I treated our survival as a logistical problem. Doctor, not an emotional one." 2 days later, his report landed on the desk of Judge Harris. It was not the damning document the Brady family had paid their experts to predict. It was a vindication. The subject exhibits no signs of psychosis, paranoia, or delusional thinking. Dr. Arastham wrote, her affect is flat, consistent with acute trauma management, but her cognitive processing is highly organized. Her actions on the water were not those of a suicidal individual, but of a highly rational actor preserving life under extreme duress. That report was the hammer that shattered their unstable mother narrative, but it was what happened next that turned the hammer into a guillotine. I was called to the office of Renee Harkins, the Assistant Commonwealth's Attorney for Russell County. She was a sharp-edged woman with a reputation for hunting domestic abusers for sport. Deputy Kelso was there, too, looking tired, but grimly satisfied. "We are upgrading the investigation," Harkins said, tossing a file onto the table. "We are moving past wanton endangerment. We are looking at conspiracy to commit murder." I felt a cold shiver walk down my spine. Murder. I thought they just wanted to scare me into signing the land deal. "That is what we thought too," Kelso said. Until Monica Vale sent over the discovery packet from the civil suit, Kelso pulled out a document. It was a standard life insurance policy, the kind with dense, small print that nobody reads until it is too late. "This policy was taken out 6 months ago," Kelso said. "It insures the life of Ruth Rogers for $2 million. The beneficiary is not your husband, it is not your daughter, it is a corporate entity called Stonebridge Holdings, LLC. Mason's company," I whispered. "We checked the corporate registry," Harkins said. "Stonebridge Holdings lists Mason Brady as the managing member, but look at the signature on the authorization line." I looked. The ink was black. The handwriting was familiar. A loop on the P that I had seen on birthday cards and mortgage papers for 12 years. Philip Brady. "He signed it," I said. The realization didn't hurt. It just left a hollow space in my chest where my heart used to be. "He signed a policy that made me worth $2 million to his brother's company. And here is the kicker," Harkins said, tapping the date at the top of the page. "The policy had a 6-month contestability waiting period for certain types of accidental death. That waiting period expired exactly 48 hours before you arrived at Lake Cumberland." The room went silent. The math was terrifyingly simple. If I had died on the boat, if I had drowned, or if I had committed suicide out of paranoia, the policy would have paid out. The land was just the appetizer. I was the main course. The $75,000 from the developer was nothing compared to the $2 million they would get for my body. "They didn't want the land," I said, my voice shaking. "They needed the liquidity. Mason's company is failing. Isn't it?" "We are auditing Stonebridge now," Harkins said. "They are leveraged to the hilt. They owe contractors. They owe banks. That $2 million was the bailout. You were the bailout. Ruth?" This changed everything. It wasn't a family dispute gone wrong. It was a cold-blooded financial transaction. They had calculated the ROI of my death. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now," Harkins said, leaning forward. "We see who breaks first, and I think we found our weak link." She slid a photo across the table. It was a surveillance shot taken outside a law office in Lexington, Kentucky. "That is Grant Brady," Kelso said. "Your father-in-law?" "He went to see a criminal defense attorney yesterday morning," Harkins said. "Not the family lawyer, a separate one, a lawyer who specializes in plea deals." I looked at the photo of Grant. He looked old, shrunken. He was the patriarch, but he was also a coward. He had watched his sons plan this. But now that the charges were shifting from endangerment to conspiracy to murder, he was looking for an exit ramp. "He knows," I said. "He knows you have the battery nut. He knows about the insurance." "He is terrified," Harkins agreed. "He is 70 years old. He doesn't want to die in prison for Mason's debt. We are going to squeeze him. But we have something else that might break Philip before we even get to Grant." Kelso opened her laptop. Caleb Wren came back. He was cleaning out his truck and he realized his dash cam was running while he was parked at the marina ramp waiting for a client. The dash cam records when the engine is off, I asked. It is motion activated, Kelso said, and the Brady family parked their Hummer right in front of his truck. She pressed play. The video was grainy, shot through the windshield of Caleb's truck. But the image was clear enough. It was the marina parking lot. The timestamp was 2:15 in the afternoon. I watched as Mason, Janelle, Loretta, and Philip sat on the lowered tailgate of the Hummer. The sun was beating down, the same sun that was blistering my skin at that exact moment. They were not pacing. They were not on their phones calling the police. They were eating sandwiches. I watched Philip take a bite of a sub, chew it slowly, and wash it down with a beer. He said something to Mason. Mason threw his head back and laughed. It was a big, hearty laugh. Loretta was wiping a smudge of mayo from Janelle's cheek. It looked like a tailgate party. They look bored, I said. The rage was a cold, hard knot in my throat. They are just waiting for the clock to run out. This video destroys the grieving, panicked family defense, Harkins said. If we show this to a jury, Philip drinking a beer while his wife and child are missing, they will convict him in 10 minutes. Does Philip know you have this? I asked. Not yet, Harkins said. We are going to bring him in for a voluntary interview tomorrow. We are going to sit him down, play this video, slide the insurance policy across the table, and give him a choice. He can go down for conspiracy to commit murder, which carries a life sentence, or he can tell us exactly whose idea it was to take the battery nuts off. I went back to the hotel, but I couldn't sleep. I sat in the dark, watching the streetlights cast long shadows across the room. Lena was asleep in the bed next to me, her breathing soft and rhythmic. I thought about the man in the video, the man eating the sandwich. I had shared a bed with him for 12 years. I had washed his clothes. I had held his hand when his mother was sick. I thought I knew him. I thought he was weak. Yes, but fundamentally decent. I thought he was the victim of his brother's bullying. I was wrong. Weakness is not a defense against evil. Weakness is the soil where evil grows. Philip was not a victim. He was a man who had decided that his comfort, his standing in the family, and his financial future were worth more than my life. He had signed the paper. He had eaten the sandwich. The next morning, the phone rang. It was Monica. They arrested Philip, she said. What? He went in for the interview with Harkins. They showed him the tape. They showed him the insurance policy. He vomited on the table. Ruth, literally. Did he talk? He didn't just talk. He sang. He gave up Mason. He gave up Loretta. He admitted that the plan was Mason's idea, but he admitted he signed the policy knowing what it was for. He claims he tried to back out at the last minute, that he argued with Mason on the dock. But Mason threatened to expose Philip's own embezzlement from the company if he didn't go through with it. Embezzlement? Apparently, Philip has been skimming from Stonebridge to pay off his own gambling debts. That was the leverage Mason had. It is a snake pit. Ruth, they are all eating each other. Where is he now? He is in holding at the Russell County Detention Center. Bail is set at $5 million. He is not getting out. Mason and Loretta were picked up an hour ago. Janelle is cooperating in exchange for immunity regarding the child endangerment charges. I hung up the phone. I walked over to the window. The rain had stopped. The sun was coming out, weak and watery. It was over. The trap they had set for me had snapped shut on their own necks. But as I looked at Lena, I realized it wasn't over. Not really. The legal battle was just beginning. There would be trials. There would be testimony. I would have to stand in a courtroom and point a finger at the father of my child and call him a murderer. I would have to explain to Lena why her daddy couldn't come to her graduation, why he couldn't walk her down the aisle. You chose this. The words from the note echoed in my head. Philip had chosen. He had chosen money over us. He had chosen fear over love. And now, I had to make a choice too. I could be the victim, the poor woman who survived the lake, or I could be the architect of their final destruction. I picked up my phone and dialed Monica back. Monica, I said, I want to talk about the land. The land, Ruth. Forget the land. We have them on murder charges. No, I said. The murder charges put them in prison, but I want to hurt them where they actually live. I want to hurt the money. What are you thinking? That 3 acres, I said. It is still the bottleneck. The development can't proceed without it. Stonebridge has defaulted on their loans because the project is stalled. If I hold that land, the bank forecloses on Mason's entire portfolio, his house, Loretta's house, everything. That is correct, Monica said slowly. You hold the pin. I don't want to hold it, I said. I want to donate it. Donate it. To the state of Kentucky, I said. For a permanent wildlife conservation easement, named in honor of the survivors of domestic violence, explicitly prohibiting any commercial development, ever. There was a long silence on the line. Then, I heard Monica laugh. It was a dark, delighted sound. Ruth, she said, that renders the surrounding 100 acres of Stonebridge property useless. It turns a $20 million development into a glorified picnic area. It bankrupts the estate. It leaves them with nothing to pay for their defense attorneys. Exactly, I said. Draw up the papers. I hung up. I looked at Lena. She stirred in her sleep, rolling over to hug her pillow. They had tried to take her mother. They had tried to take her future. I would take their kingdom. I walked to the desk and pulled out the hotel stationery. I picked up a pen. I didn't write a suicide note. I wrote a deed of gift. And for the first time in 2 weeks, I smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a woman who had woken up in the middle of a lake and realized she was the storm. The courtroom in the Russell County Courthouse smelled of old pine cleaner and stale anxiety. It was not the cinematic arena I had seen on television. The ceilings were too low, the lighting was too yellow, and the air conditioning rattled with a noise that sounded like a dying engine. But the silence in the room was absolute. I sat in the front row behind the prosecution table. On the other side of the aisle, the Brady family sat in a rigid line. Mason wore a suit that cost more than the bailiff's car, but it looked ill-fitting on him now, as if he had shrunk inside it. Loretta was clutching a rosary, her eyes fixed on the floor. Janelle was staring straight ahead, refusing to look at her husband, and Philip. My husband sat at the defense table, separated from his family by his own lawyer. He looked hollowed out. The tan from the lake had faded into a sickly, grayish pallor. He didn't look at me. He looked at his hands, which were clasped so tightly on the table that his knuckles were the color of bone. Assistant District Attorney Renee Harkins stood up. She didn't pace. She didn't shout. She walked to the center of the well and placed a timeline on the easel. It was a simple black line with timestamps. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Harkins began, her voice steady and lethal. "This case is not about a bad day on the lake. It is not about a mechanical failure. It is about a calculation." She pointed to the first mark on the line. January 14th, 11 in the morning, the victim, Ruth Rogers, is drugged and placed on a boat that has been stripped of all safety equipment, no oars, no radio, no flares, and most importantly, no engine capability. She moved her finger. 3:30 in the afternoon. The defendants return to the marina. They offload their gear. They are safe. They have cell service. They have access to the sheriff's office, which is less than 10 minutes away. She paused, letting the silence stretch. "For the next 4 hours," Harkin said, "not a single call is made to emergency services, not one. Instead, calls are made to a real estate attorney, calls are made to a criminal defense firm, and a fax is sent to a family court judge in Ohio alleging that the victim is mentally unstable." Harkins turned to look directly at the defense table. "Why?" she asked. "Why does a family, upon realizing a mother and child are missing, call a lawyer instead of a rescue team? Because they were not waiting for a rescue. They were waiting for a death certificate." She called her first witness, the technical expert from the crime lab. He was a man of few words, which made his testimony more damaging. He held up the photos of the battery cables. "These are not stress fractures," he said, pointing to the shiny, scarred metal of the terminal posts. "These are tool marks. A wrench was used to torque these nuts off. This requires manual force and specific intent. You cannot accidentally unscrew a battery nut and then accidentally throw it into the lake." Then came Caleb Wren. When the video from his dashcam played on the courtroom monitors, I heard a collective intake of breath from the jury. The screen showed the sun-drenched parking lot of the marina. It showed the Brady family sitting on the tailgate of the Hummer. Mason was laughing, his head thrown back. Philip was eating a sandwich, holding a beer bottle. Loretta was smiling. They looked like they were at a tailgate party before a football game. "Mr. Wren?" Harkins asked. "What time was this video recorded?" 2:15 in the afternoon, Caleb said. "And where was Ms. Rogers at that time?" "She was drifting 4 miles out in the main channel," Caleb said, "in 90-degree heat, with no water. Does this look like a search party to you, Mr. Wren?" "No, ma'am," Caleb said, his voice hard. "It looks like a celebration." I watched the jury. I saw a woman in the back row look at Philip with pure disgust. I saw a man in the front row cross his arms and shake his head. The grieving family defense had just evaporated, but the final nail wasn't the video. It was the traitor. The Commonwealth calls Philip Brady to the stand. The room seemed to tilt. Philip stood up. His lawyer whispered something in his ear, probably a reminder of the plea deal they had cut at the 11th hour. Philip walked to the witness box. He looked like a man walking to the gallows. He swore to tell the truth. I wondered if he even remembered what the truth felt like. "Mr. Brady," Harkins said, "did you know that the boat your wife was on had been disabled?" Philip took a sip of water. His hand shook so badly the water splashed onto his tie. "I knew there was a plan," he whispered. "Speak up, please," the judge instructed. "I knew there was a plan," Philip said, his voice cracking. "Mason said we needed to separate her. He said we needed her to be scared. He told me that if she was stuck out there for a few hours, she would sign the land transfer just to get off the water." "And who took the battery nuts?" Harkins asked. "Mason did," Philip said. "I saw him do it. He had the toolbox from the truck. He told me to keep watch." "And the phone?" Harkins asked. "Ms. Rogers' phone was missing. Who took it?" Philip closed his eyes. "I did." A gasp went through the room. I felt a tear slide down my cheek, hot and angry. "Why?" Harkins asked. "Loretta told me to," Philip said. "She said Ruth would call for help too soon. She said we needed time for the drift to work. So I took it out of her bag while she was getting Lena's sunscreen. I gave it to Loretta. She put it in her purse." Mason stood up at the defense table. "You liar," he screamed. "You spineless little—" "Sit down," the bailiff shouted. Mason's lawyer yanked him back into his seat. Harkins waited for the chaos to settle. She wasn't done. "Mr. Brady," she said, her voice dropping to a dangerous quiet. "You claim this was about the land, about a $75,000 transfer." "Yes," Philip said. "It was just about the land. You didn't know about any other financial incentives." "No," Philip said. "I swear, I just wanted the land deal to go through so Mason would stop pressuring me." Harkins walked back to her table. She picked up a single piece of paper. "Defense Exhibit C," she said. "An email dated January 12th, 2 days before the trip. Sent from the Stonebridge corporate server to your personal email account. Subject line, policy confirmation." Philip's face went white. "The email confirms the activation of a $2 million life insurance policy on Ruth Rogers." Harkins read, "And it includes a read receipt. You opened this email. Mr. Brady. At 10:42 in the morning, and you replied?" She put the paper in front of him. "Read the reply, please." Philip stared at the paper. He couldn't speak. "Read it," Harkins commanded. Philip's voice was a ghost. "It says, 'Got it. Just make sure the waiting period is clear.'" "You knew," Harkins said. You weren't just scaring her for the land. You were waiting for the insurance payout. You signed off on your wife's death for $2 million. I didn't think she would die, Philip sobbed, collapsing forward onto the railing. I thought it was just a backup. I didn't want her to die. No further questions, Harkin said. The verdict came back in 3 hours. Loretta Brady, guilty of conspiracy to commit murder, kidnapping, and wanton endangerment. Mason Brady, guilty of attempted murder, conspiracy, tampering with physical evidence, and child endangerment. Janelle Brady, guilty of facilitation. Philip Brady, per his plea agreement, was found guilty of conspiracy to commit endangerment and insurance fraud because he testified. He avoided the murder charge, but his life as he knew it was over. The sentencing hearing was a week later. Loretta, the matriarch who brewed poison tea, was sentenced to 20 years. She would likely die in prison. Mason got 25 years. Grant was given 5 years of probation and house arrest for concealing the felony. And Philip, the judge looked at him with pity and contempt. Mr. Brady, you are a weak man, and your weakness nearly cost 2 people their lives. You will serve 5 years in a federal facility, followed by 10 years of strict probation. But the real sentence didn't come from the criminal judge. It came from the family court. I stood before the family court judge 3 days later. Philip was there via video link from the detention center. Full legal and physical custody is awarded to the mother, Ruth Rogers, the judge ruled. Mr. Brady is granted supervised visitation once a month, pending the completion of his sentence and mandatory psychological counseling. The paternal grandmother and uncle are granted no-contact orders indefinitely. I walked out of the courthouse. The sun was shining. It was over. But there was one loose end, the land. I drove back to Ohio. I met Monica in her office. She had the papers ready. "Are you sure about this?" Monica asked. "You could sell it. Stonebridge is in receivership. Another developer would pay a fortune for that bottleneck." "I don't want the money," I said. "I want the memory." I signed the deed. I didn't sell the 3 acres. I didn't keep them. I donated them to the Kentucky Department of Fish and Wildlife Resources. But I attached a restrictive covenant, a permanent conservation easement. The land was designated as a protected sanctuary for indigenous flora. It could never be paved. It could never be built upon. It could never be used as an access road. By locking up those 3 acres, I strangled the entire Stonebridge development. The 100 acres Mason and his investors had bought around it were now useless landlocked hills. Without the access road through my property, they couldn't build the marina. They couldn't build the condos. The bank foreclosed on Stonebridge Holdings the following Tuesday. Mason lost his house. Loretta's assets were seized to pay the investors. Philip's equity was wiped out. I had bankrupted them with a signature. 6 months later, I sat on the porch of a new house, a small cottage near a different lake, far away from Kentucky. Lena was in the yard, playing with a puppy we had adopted. She was laughing. She was healing. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small, folded piece of paper. It was battered and worn, sealed inside a plastic bag. "You chose this." I looked at the words one last time. They had meant it as an accusation. They had meant it to be the epitaph of a woman who gave up. But I read it differently now. I had chosen. I chose not to drink the tea. I chose to count the hours. I chose to save the evidence. I chose to fight back when they thought I was drowning. I lit a match. I held the flame to the corner of the paper. I watched the words curl and blacken. I watched the white bond paper turn to ash and float away on the breeze. "Yes," I whispered to the wind. "I chose this. I chose to live, and I chose to make sure that no one, ever again, would write my story for me." Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Please leave a comment below telling me your city or country, so we can see how far Ruth's story has traveled. If you enjoyed this journey of justice and survival, please make sure to subscribe to the Juliet Revenge Stories channel, like this video, And smash that hype button to help this story reach even more people who need to hear it. Your support means the world to us.